Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Minahan. This is Talk Cosmos. And immediately, I have something I hadn't thought about, but looking at that slide, it said the week of the 12th. Well, today's the 11th. The 12th is the full moon, and that was big on my brain, and it still is. And really, that reminds me of Saturn, of time. It wasn't always time. It was agriculture, but we associate Cronus or Saturn with time. So, hey, I guess in a way, there you go. We're a little off, but today is May 11th, and I'm just thrilled and delighted to have our special show today about an epic voyage going into time at the very start, the baby. Well, okay, we won't go infant, whatever, but still, Aries is the beginning of the zodiac. With that said, let's begin. Planet Buzz, we are now ready. Thank you.
Focusing on perspectives of pattern planet cycle relationships and understanding their archetypal energy consciousness, reflecting through history, current events, mythology, and philosophical questions, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
And I'm Dr. Laura Todd. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strengths, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Learn more at mythicsky.com.
Plus, a special guest who we will introduce in just a short moment.
And as the ancient Hermetic Code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Hi, Laura, Dr. Tad. Greetings.
Yeah, good to be back.
Yes, it is.
We talk about this upcoming transitional energy that we've got.
I know. I'm not quite, well, we almost got on a plane, but the fact is that how are we traveling? You know, how is it entering? It's already entering our psyche and all that. Let's get to our guest. I am thrilled to have Jason Holley. And Jason Holley is at, hello, Jason? Yeah. Oh, there you go. You got muted. Yes. Hi. So Jason, yeah, hi. It's so wonderful. I've had classes with Jason. He's a phenomenal. He's just the best and always a treasure to listen to at all the lectures. But we'll go into that in just a minute. JasonHolley.com, and that's Hermes Hestia Living Center for Astrologies. And he also has another, because he has another site, because there is a retreat and it might be full, but you can look at it and figure it out for next year. This is the first year. It's livingastrologies.net. Jason.
Website is jasonholley.net. Jasonholley.com is an artist who's worth a look, so maybe that will be fun. But that won't be astrology.
Okay. Well, that's clear. That's always interesting how the universe is. Well, you're so artistic in many ways. An astrologer, psychotherapist, you consult professionally, both astrologers and psychotherapists. And of course, many, you can see on his jasonholley.net site, the mythology and zodiac experience classes. And if you miss this retreat, which we will advertise in the middle, you can always go next year. Besides being an author, when you decide to publish those books you're writing about animals, how's that going? Living in the circle of animals and constellations.
Well, the living in the circle of animals, the zodiac, the meaning of zodiacos is a circle of animals, and that's really the what we see pictured in the sky are these creatures, and in many ways, I relate to the horoscope and the living sky as an ecosystem, and encourage people to experience their own ecosystem internally, and also our embeddedness in a world of relations. And so living in the circle of animals is really about a mode of astrology that is sort of eco-psychological, you could say, that really seeks to find, how do you find habitat for these different creatures in your life? Where do they each get to have a place to play, a place to be? Most of us have a few of them trapped in the zoo, or not allowed to follow their how do we help them all follow their instincts and have a chance to do that? And the Constellations of Meaning is a book about the Greek and Roman, and sometimes the Mesopotamian myths of each of the zodiac signs, because astrologers often know about the planetary myths, but less so the sign myths are known. And then also, this is a mode of connecting with those in a way that really respects them as stories, really gets curious about the details of the stories. It's not a mode of astrology that takes the myth and turns it into keyword. It's actually the very opposite, sort of taking the keyword and dimensionalizing it into story.
I love it, because it's so often people think of it almost like melodrama. Oh, they did this, they did that, but it is that intentional meaning to put yourself in that place of thousands of years ago when there was impressions that, just like any symbol has more than 1,000 words. I'm looking forward to that, Jason.
Me too.
Oh, goody. Okay.
We'll see. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. And you can hear Jason at NORWAC, at UAC, at many lectures. And besides that, he is a faculty member at the University of Astrology University. I got that mixed up. And locally in Santa Fe, Southwestern College, and the Mercury Internet School. Well, excellent. Thank you very much for joining.
Yeah.
We'll go briefly through some of these. We'll play with others. We haven't done this as a group, folks. And Saturn is the 6th planet from the sun as it orbits. This you can look at later. There's a lot of information. This is part of the family tree, and you can find out about it. Let's talk about Saturn. Originally the god of time and agriculture. He had that sickle or a scythe. And this picture depicts the dragons taking his chariot, which I think is fascinating. Hermes, of course, has 2 dragons or serpents, snakes is whatever you call it, around his caduceus, and here I had not realized that he had a chariot of serpents. Maybe there's his. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I suspect that this is an image, that a post-classical image. I'm pretty sure there is no storytelling or association that way with the chariot. So, but this is what happens to astrological.
Okay.
They change over time, and they take different shapes according to the culture and its ability to recognize different parts of the symbol. So, I want to go back though, because you made a point of showing we don't have to go back in the slides, but I just mean, you made a point of showing the astronomical situation of Saturn, and it's the 7th planet. I mean, the 6th from the sun, yes, but we think of the sun as a planet, in astrology. So
that's true.
Maybe the big thing to consider with that solar system piece is that Saturn, for a very long time, was seen as the outer limit, the furthest out, because it was the slowest moving, and it was the furthest out that people could see, including us. We can see it, visibly, before the telescope brings in, Uranus, who kind of steps in and says, surprise, there's much more to this universe than you thought. But Saturn has this quality of containment and holding, right? If we just think that for the ancients, Saturn was at the very outside. So Saturn sets the boundary. Saturn contains. Saturn holds, and that is pretty congruent in many ways to the mythological Saturn. as well. But I saw
Excellent. Yeah. And it's been brought up too that on the other side, Saturn sees beyond, which is beginning to bring up that idea that more in our consciousness, that Saturn, of course, it brings from our vision, it has the goals, but it manifests the goals from what it sees that we don't see. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In the Vedic stories of Shani, right? He was the driver of the sun's chariot. So that notion of directing you towards your goals, is, I think, very much, that Saturn is sort of the, if the sun is light, Saturn is the pencil that draws the line and sketches, and sketches your fate. It's a pretty strong association. Another way, mythically, because you had invoked that with one of the slides earlier, Saturn's a Titan, right? Kronos was a Titan. So in Greek myth, you can really think of just three really clear generations, really four. A primordial group that starts with Eros and night and chaos and so on, that leads to Gaia and Uranus, the earth and the sky. Then they create the several offspring, that the Titans are one of them. But Uranus will not allow the Titans to be born. He keeps pushing them back down into Gaia and doesn't let them incarnate. And eventually Saturn is the one who leads the charge against Uranus. Uranus is constantly, in other words, keeping things from potential things from taking form, right? That's the myth sort of shows us that. And Kronos, or Saturn, rises up and is famously, castrates Uranus, but maybe even more meaningfully, he and four of his brothers do a thing of taking Uranus and pinning him to the four directions. So taking the sky and pinning it to the four directions, and that cross, the incarnational cross, right? That Uranus is devoted to pure potential, but Saturn insists that we bring potential into time and form, the cross. And the directions, right? The four directions.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is very much about, bring it into incarnation.
Yes.
Binds this pure potential of Uranus into form.
I love being reminded. Laura, you have a thought?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, that I'm trying to not jump around too much, but it's that idea that Saturn concretizes things, right? It's that creating that form, creating that structure. And just speak a little bit back to that idea of 7, because that becomes such an important part of how we understand Saturn as well. And these 7-year cycles of the square, the opposition, and the return, and how that also parallels, at least the first round, psychological development of children as well. That the age of reason being the age at 7, which Saturn makes the first square to Saturn's where it was natally when we were born. And so that's again part of that time, part of that maturation, and that Saturn really holds that container for. And that idea of making it more, of concretizing in that way, that like prior to 7 age in development, there's a much more amorphous side of self that kids have in some ways, and that they're more contained in a more solid identity post the age of 7, and that being part of that Saturnian relationship that shows up.
The Saturn returns, and I am clearly reminded about that graphic there, folks, where I had the 6. I was simply thinking, because this is excellent at really drilling the brain that it's the 7th, because I was only thinking as all those lines and the way the planets were geared up, where did it fall in relationship to the sun in the center? So here, thank you for bringing all that up, because time, I've often thought that when Saturn came in, because Saturn ruled so gloriously for so long, until the story goes on, how he got dethroned, which we'll come up to. But boy, what am I thinking? I'm suddenly out there thinking about Saturn getting dethroned. Okay. Oh, Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Where do you want us to go?
I just lost myself. Let's talk about this because he ends up what goes around comes around, and he very clearly is fearful of this prophecy. Not only did he overthrow his father, the primordial Uranus god, in a very dramatic way, cutting off his genitals, which essentially then stripped him of his power, and as you said, put him on the 4 seasons. Oh, I know what I'm thinking. In the eons of time, if we think about the Earth being 4.5 billion years old, that when time it finally came about getting vegetarian, not vegetarian, but in other words, animals and not even animals, just growth, life, that whole, or it could have been the dinosaurs, who knows? But the ancients knew these things somehow through the point is that Saturn could have ruled so much of this created life beginning. And I hope I'm not going too far in my abstraction. Anyway, let's get to Cronus right now. He ate all his kids.
Not all of them. That's the whole that's the fun part of the story. But yeah, there is a fear that he has. This is it's a series of patricides, right? And so Saturn does have the fear of what would happen if his children are allowed to come up. And so again, you have this thing of like something trying to emerge and the not letting it. And so he and Rhea have their children, and each time she has a child, he swallows the child. And so 5 of them are swallowed this way, who we later come to know as the Olympians. And one of them, though, the last one, Rhea has an idea that she can, wrap a stone as if it were a swaddled baby, and give it to Kronos or Saturn here, and then trick him so that he swallows the stone. And she smuggles her child, who will be Zeus or Jupiter. She smuggles him off. There's a few different stories about where he ends up, but basically, he's taken somewhere. My favorite is that he's given to this nanny goat, Amalthea, who is one of our Capricorn symbols. And that one creates the chat thing, creates the Jupiter, who can come back and then really end Saturn in that way. And when he ends Saturn, it's interesting because you're referring to Saturn, yes, agricultural, but there's always been an implication with Saturn that he's associated with age and with these things of time. Even though yes, the name is different, Kronos, but the time thing was there even before that. And but what he does end up happening to him that's kind of interesting is that after he's banished, initially, he's placed in Tartarus and all this, but eventually he rules over the Isle of the Blessed, which was one of the better endings for you if you had to go to the underworld. The Greeks didn't have any really particularly lovely underworlds, but if you had to do it, the Isle of the Blessed would be a pretty good place to go. It's actually in the Black Sea, where it was held to be. Achilles goes there, Helen goes there. It's a good place. And so he rules over that. And what's said about Saturn is that before all of this happened, right, that he was a ruler of the golden age, meaning when everything was working the way it's supposed to be working. So in some sense, you could see he's got a reputation in astrology as always putting us through things. But in some sense, you could see that Saturn recognizes that things are out of balance. Things are not in their natural relations, and that he's putting limits on all the ways we keep on flying off from our natural relations. Because he's at a time when the animals are speaking, people are speaking to the animals, they're speaking to the gods, they're hearing from the gods. He's coming from that time, in an earlier moment. And so even when we don't like what he's doing, arguably a lot of times it's to help us be back in a more, natural relations with our whole web of relations. This is a very earthy, earth-centric, land-based way of life that Saturn asks for, right? Don't go flying into the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
and I think that's where we see that idea, like that idea of containment with Saturn and the rules and structure, that idea that it was the barrier that you talked about earlier, right? And that there is importance in that. There is value in that, even now in modern times. There's a reason children thrive with structure and boundaries, right? Like if there's no boundaries, that tends to actually stunt development. And so that there's a lot, even, that we may say like, oh, it feels controlling or domineering, which can be part of that Saturnian energy, but it has its place. There's necessity to it at the same time. And even governing time, that's part of creating the barriers and creating structure, creating order to things. So there is a before and an after, which doesn't exist if there's no time.
Yeah,
Oh, I was going to say exactly. And both of you have defined a little better my theory about that. We needed time in order to exist here. You got to have mortality. You can't just have infinity. Well, some people in this day of AI might disagree that we can be bionic and live forever. But the reality is that plants grow, plants die, people live, people die. There's a genealogy, a longevity that goes on, that you pass on. All of this is Saturn. And because of the the placement of the planet, that was what I was trying to combine in my head. Is that, because it is a seventh planet, it is the outer reach, the limits, all of this is echoing the same reality that we focus with. In vibrational astrology, is very simple. Saturn looks at what is the core and fundamental essence of anything. It strips it down to its bare necessity, which again is limiting. It's the contraction versus the expansion of Jupiter. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's an important, contrast. I know you had pointed out the Saturn-Jupiter square that'll happen this summer, but that's a really maybe important piece here, is that the one child who escapes Saturn is Jupiter, right? Jupiter, and if we want to understand Saturn, Jupiter, polarity involved here, and that thing of a contraction and expansion. But another way to say it too is that Jupiter is the one planet that is not swallowed by time, that can imagine across dimensions, that can take a bigger view, that rules Sagittarius and Pisces, planets that are signs that are very much about vision and seeing beyond what already is. So both these things are needed, and I think we are in a world that often values the Jupiterian mode, the expansion and the satisfaction of every desire. The bigger is always better. That's often they call Jupiter the benefic and Saturn is the malefic. And one way might just be say Jupiter adds and Saturn subtracts. And often that becomes that Jupiter must be the good one because you always want more. But Saturn is the power of less, the power of less, the power, the incredible power of that to really
opening space.
Yeah.
Thank you. I adore listening to the subtleties that you always bring in, Jason. And I needed a pen, which I will get and jot that down. It is so true. This idea that together they actually work very well. Oh, the fact that it escaped, that's the one child that the expansion could still live. And and that eventually Cronus or Saturn, the fate you could put down, or the climb to the mountain is in the sense of the zodiac with Capricorn going up, which it rules naturally, that it It had a great ending. A great ending. I mean, just the best ending you would ever want. The island of the blessed island. And then again, maybe thinking that it is, because there's always this traditional and the modern astrology, and traditional is very black and white, that we're trying to reinterpret, many of us here, with the idea that if it is a co-ruler of Aquarius, which I do believe Uranus is a modern evolutionary astrologer, but I do recognize Saturn, that, hey, in a sense, it broke the rules, right? It went to Tartarus. It was in exile, but Zeus brought him back. Didn't have to go with the same old story. So in other words, depending on, yeah. Okay, I'm wrapping up too many ideas here. Maybe we should talk about Saturn and Aries, and I'll listen to you both. Oh. It's a fire sign. It's going to have that instinct. Yes, Laura.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, this is part of why we're bringing this up now as a show, is that we're about to have this transition, this shift with Saturn ingressing into Aries here in a couple of weeks. And that although he goes retrograde and will go back into Pisces for a stint, this is a shift, and it is that Saturnian cycle. That's that 28-year cycle. So it's been a minute since Saturn was last here. And so looking at that cyclical piece, as well as that shift into Aries, and combining those energies that on one hand are just like that expansion and contraction, even though Jupiter isn't associated with Aries, they're still radically different energies. Saturn likes to contain, Aries just wants to go. And so that merging of those energies is a very tricky dance in some ways, but it can
How shall we do it? Yes.
Be there's a lot of benefit to it as well. Again, like Saturn's not bad. It has its place, and sort of that containing of energy. I like containing of energy in some ways is that place that we're moving into. And just for folks who are just listening, so Saturn ingresses on the 25th and then retrogrades September 1st, and then is back into Aries on Valentine's Day. And next year. And so that's part of this, there's a lot that we'll say about that throughout the other half of the show, but we're just in this tipping point of this containing energy of Saturn moving into this energy that is that rushing energy, that impatient energy of Aries. That merging impatience with containment is an interesting blend to find ourselves, and seeing how that both individually and collectively is manifesting is powerful. And if knowing where you were 28 years ago, mid 90s, you can get some, for people listening, reflecting on what was going on for you at that time period. It's always a little different, but there can be some echoes of things that were going on during that time that will show up for you in your own life right now. I think of that's the peeling of the onion, right?
Yeah.
Because everything else is somewhere else. You're not who you were 30 years ago, but there may be some.
But there is a theme going on. Like, for instance, just briefly speaking, 67 and 90, at that time, I split. I took off, did things. And I'm wondering, okay, so what's happening now? There is a theme, but more than that, I think in Aries, we think of Mars, we think of Achilles. Jason, you just did the Iliad and the Odyssey. Great story, especially with the Iliad. Well, both of them are warriors, but the Iliad with Achilles is the greatest warrior. And in a sense, that is the direction of and maybe we don't have to bring in Iliad. These are big ideas. So, but I am thinking with that passion of fire that you're bringing up, Laura, that it can initiate. That's the beautiful thing. If we can temper it with Saturn, to find out what's essential and get some steps involved and get a game plan of some sort. If that works with Saturn and Aries.
Well, one way to think about this also is just to really feel the momentousness of Saturn completing a tour in the zodiac. Aries is the beginning. And right now, as we approach this, Saturn's at the very end of Pisces. It's gone all the way around the zodiac. It's there's a way that things get kind of saturated and almost like a sponge that's full of water. By the time you're at the end of Pisces, kind of a desperately in need of being wrung out, and sometimes even moldy and humid with conspiracy theory or whatever has accumulated, and we can't ignore this particular round that Neptune has been doing the same thing. So there's a massive amount of energy that we've had at the Aries Pisces cusp. All the inner planets also, besides Mars, did a whole back and forth over there in recent time. So there's a huge thing of like the heavy weight of what has been accumulated, and then a very strong interest in bursting out. And yet Saturn will insist that you have to do that in a contained way. It will not allow things to just move and run off. The way you just now said that, it's like Saturn is really going to be insisting. And Saturn, in the ancient way of seeing, Saturn would be seen as in the detriment in Aries. And this isn't about a good or a bad thing about it. Mm-hmm. It is about the idea that the Aries energy is not some of what Saturn is, like what Laura was saying. The Aries energy, generally wants to go forward quickly and go do something. And Saturn is going to swallow it, the same way he swallows his children. Saturn's going to say, no, you're going to have to gestate some. I've always seen that stay that the Olympians make in his stomach. One way to think about that is that they are matured by that. And, Zeus and Jupiter is the one who does not become matured. So on the one hand, yay, Jupiter free from time. On the other hand, Zeus, Jupiter, we know, was prone to all kinds of misadventure. So, there is something very powerful and very insistent about Saturn, and especially Saturn and Neptune. Again, we can't really ignore that this round, that, the disillusionments that are necessary, the kind of like, slowing down and thinking ahead. And so I think that's what people might be likely to feel is I'm trying to move, but I'm not allowed to move at the pace I want to move at. And, really asking yourself the question, what is gestating? What needs more thoughtful application? What needs more time, which does not have to, kill the Eros or kill the life force. It doesn't have to be a killing. But there is a kind of alchemical process with Saturn and Aries, that really wants to hold you in the vessel and apply the heat slowly and methodically. But you don't have to turn the heat off. It's just to really benefit from the container, from the alembic, if you think in alchemical terms.
I love this. It's very valuable.
So
we need to take a break. Yes, we are. And just to let you know, there is this slide. Look at it, your own timing. It says it pretty much. Who's in control? What does power look like? We'll find out.
Circle back to that because there's something to.
Well, possibly. Yeah, we'll do more. So we have here Jason Holley and Dr. Laura Tad, myself, Sue Minahan. Come back. We have just begun, and it's about the upcoming Saturn in Aries. See you quickly. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Taurus. By leaving a cycle based upon initiation, the energy of Taurus integrates spirit into a solid form of matter that is tangible and physical. It's an earth sign, concerned with self-sufficiency and the values to maintain the strength of a life form throughout its survival.
Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
This is Martha Norwalk every Sunday morning beginning at 9 a.m. Thanks in part to Dr. Nils Rasmussen at healingministryforanimals.com. We cover the world of animals. This week, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me, and talk with your human or animal loved ones on this side or the other, and private readings with Natasha. Hope you can join us and plan to call in with your questions for either one of us. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Walking your talk? Take us with you. The KKNW app makes streaming our programming easy on your phone or tablet.
Hi, everybody. We're back again. And this is about, and usually at the half hour, we just do a quick little survey of what everybody's doing for our speakers. Jason has his conference, and I guess it's full. Yes, perhaps.
Yeah, well, but I want to say something about it because the conference is not just a conference for the people coming. It's an intervention in consciousness, because this is really about a different mode of astrology that is highly oriented towards lived experience of astrology. So most conferences, which I love also, other ones, but they are lectures and somebody's talking and somebody's listening. That's not what we're doing here. It's all experiential. So people are facilitating workshops where you get a living experience through astrodrama, through art making, through writing prompts, through dance, through playback theater, all kinds of ways. There are people who integrate with family constellation work. There are people who integrate with internal family systems. So we have some of those creative integrations. Dream work is there, fairy tales. So it's really about recognizing that astrology is a way to live and move through life, and can actually weave us deeper into our connection with life. And it is a co-created experience. So it's not experts producing knowledge and other people consuming it. It's about all of us co-creating it. So it's going to be here in Santa Fe for the October 2 to 5. And yes, we are full with registered participants because it's intentionally just 120, 150 people. Like that's what we decided. In order to keep it metabolizable. You know, there's a lot of good research that 150 is as big as a village can get before it splits. Anthropology, that's a very well-established thing. So we're hoping to have a village. But that said, you know, this is an emergent mode of astrology that people do all over. Most people, it's just not talked about as much. Many people in their local communities do things to experience astrology and not just talk about it. And so that's what we're really talking about. And so it is for everybody, and it is many things will also be developed to assist others in facilitating experiential astrology, and will be, a lot will be emergent from this. This is a Pluto and Aquarius. This is another way to do Pluto and Aquarius besides fascism and techno bros.
Yeah, even Saturn and Aries and Neptune and Aries. When you think of that personal identification, the experience going forth, it's wonderful. It's perfect.
So that's really, and I do a lot of other stuff, but it's all on my website.
Yes, as we had said, classes unbelievable about, and I think one's coming up about mythology later this year with, and other retreats. It's a marvel. Laura, you have your monthly talks on the first month, but you also have your podcast about mythology.
My podcast, and I don't have the date for next year, but we'll be doing the Goddess Awakening retreat in Nicaragua again next year. And our space is expanding. My dear friend Michelle, who's building the retreat center, she's bought 2 more properties since I was there in February. So we're buying up the beach and going to make a gorgeous retreat center right on the coast, right on the border of Costa Rica. So it's literally 12 kilometers from the Costa Rican border. on the Pacific coast, and it's, you know, you get woken up by howler monkeys and see baby turtles run into the sea at sunset.
Such wonderful opportunities for networking. Exactly, with Aquarius. I know people are ready. We want to connect. For me, I'm doing some business with dwarfs, believe it or not. Next week will be the dwarf planets octaves, because we're going to do Maki with Uranus, Varana, and Saturn, Quaoar. All these might be Greek to you, and Jupiter, but it's exciting. And then there's different panels. It's all on Talk Cosmos. So thanks for what?
On their land,
Yeah.
Maki and Haumea, and they're from Hawaii.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's yes, indeed. And they're all in at about 9-10 degrees. So it's very fascinating. So they're in relationship, and the lower octaves are in relationship. It's fun. I think we all need our passion. So somehow it's like, why am I doing all this? What am I learning? I'm a Gemini. I got to learn something. We hope. Although I realize I have a lot of Jupiter too. Maybe that's the issue. Anyway, we'll go on here. And there is going to be a vibrational conference, small, first time too. Aries, first time for a lot of good things. And that's going to be on Labor Day weekend. So check that out. It's called Fractal Cosmos, and it's very reasonable. It's going to be online for the first year, but I keep advertising it. It's another good way to kind of add extra to your box and get out of that box, right? Well, we could go back, Laura, but let's look at this.
See, yeah, because we're getting short in time. So
exactly. Okay.
The charts.
Generally, this is a recap. Saturn is going to be in that great Aries beginning on the 25th, coming up. Today's the 11th. And then in the fall, right at the Labor Day weekend, it goes back into Pisces until Valentine's Day, 13th, 14th. And we're in to keep until the beginning of 2028. So there we are. This is the first ingress chart. And I decided to put it as an Aries point chart because the time is in Greenwich. But looking at houses got to be confusing. So I even took out the MC and all that. But look at that huge stellium, the whole kit and caboodle. We've got Neptune and the mystic planet of Neptune with Saturn just hugging each other, 15 degrees until they finally make it over there in February.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is again, disillusionment is what I'm hoping for. And that's kind of a, funny, but exactly true.
No, I like it. Yes.
Again, it sort of asks us, all this humidified thinking of Pisces time, and Pisces is great too, but certainly in the world, it's hard not to be aware of how many dreams people are encapsulated in, and how likely it is that Saturn meeting Neptune, really asks us to let some of that fall away, clear the air, warm it up, get rid of the fog. And really get clear, because there's something that wants to happen. Saturn wants to bring something in, but it's almost certain that one has to really let go, of a lot of things, and especially things that not slow you down, but that confuse you about where you're going. This confusion energy that Neptune sometimes carries, and that Neptune in Pisces has particularly carried, so that. One of the things about Aries is agency, the agentic power of the individual, and the possibility of mobilization. This is one of the major processes that feels very important to me. One of the aspects going on there is the sextile to Pluto and Aquarius, right? And a sextile is almost always missed in terms of what it can be, but a person paying attention to the sextile can really turn it into something. Sextile, I'm a volleyball player. Sextile, a very competitive one, by the way. And a sextile to me is like the ultimate set in volleyball. The setter running the game, the guy who decides who to pass it to, and then that person gets the pass. They are the one who hits the ball. So a sextile is a good pass. Whether you take it is a question, but it's a very good pass. And so if you look at Saturn, Neptune, it's a very good pass to over there to Pluto to do it in a different way. Right now, Pluto in Aquarius is in many ways being lived in a way that is really encapsulating and sort of everybody becomes the Borg and the machine. But Saturn and Neptune and Aries together really reminds us of the possibility of agency. The other thing that happens in Pluto and Aquarius is a frozenness can happen, a dissociation, a dismemberment, right? We know that Pluto and Aquarius is a dismantling energy, but it doesn't have to be dismembering, but that does seem to be what currently is happening. You have people, cultures are sort of tearing pieces of themselves off. And amid dismemberment, we freeze. That's often what happens. But Aries is mobilization. It is fight and flight. It's not freeze. Those are more effective responses to trauma, is to fight or to flee, right? Freeze is the least effective. It's sometimes what you have to do. You have
the shock.
But the shock time, we've been in shock. I've been in shock a bit. But the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries really is a possibility of mobilization. But to mobilize, we have to let go of certain sacred illusions about how things are. That then allows a really focused, disciplined action. And then once Saturn passes the Neptune and moves on, you have that chance for really empowered, focused action. Which is what the moment seems to call for from my way of thinking. And that changes then what the Pluto and Aquarius is, right? That changes how it expresses. But that's the image that I'm really drawn to in this chart is that possibility of agency and recovering fight and flight and not just freezing and going into the computer,
Yeah, the words help.
And I think, if people want to look back at the slide, even looking at things historically, so at the turn of the 20th century, one of the things that happened with Saturn and Aries was the first Model T was released.
Oh.
And so thinking about Saturn and Aries as containing energy and directing energy may be part of how this is happening and how we could imagine that, or even having that archetype. Those imagery sometimes can help us bring things into manifestation. If we have sort of like a vision and imagery of what something looks like, it's easier to go after it, because when it's that amorphous Pisces energy, you could go any direction in all directions simultaneously. Yeah. And Aries is very singular. And so having that idea, like that containing of energy so we can move forward.
That's beautiful. That really, that feels like exactly direct, like a combustion engine, like holding the thing and turning it, moves it in a particular way. But, again, the beauty of Neptune, right, is that Neptune does have the image of what's possible. It has it has the inspiration. Saturn then can drive the car down the road that Neptune can dream. I really love your image of the Model T. That's really, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And Laura, I would go back. My computer's a little bit challenged that way. So pardon me, but so thank you. Because
folks, turn of the 20th century, I think it was 1908 was the, around that time is the Model T, which Saturn entered Aries. And so we get that, there was several cycles ago, but that's why, like, for ourselves, and also reflecting on what we were doing mid 90s, I think it was the 96 to 99, what was going on in our lives then that may see echoes of how do you want to harness that energy to make use of it, and that idea of Saturn, that time-bound energy. So if you have energy, but it's time-bound, you have a limited amount of energy, how are you going to use it?
And embrace the limit, right? Embracing the limit as an assistance in actually getting something done and moving. The one historical mode that there's others that come to mind, but Patrick Watson is an astrologer who wrote a fantastic essay a few years ago about Saturn and Aries and showed that at all the different points, gun control and the conversation around the limitations on violence. So the FBI was created at the same Model T1. That was the FBI. The ATF, the alcohol, tobacco, firearms thing, that was created under one of those. The famous moment when Australia said guns are over here. That happened during the 96 to 98 one. So there's a conversation here of again, limits to the sort of Aries, do whatever the hell I want in the name of my personal freedom. There's a statement about how Saturn is a collectivist planet. Saturn does ask us to consider the whole. It exalts in Libra, and it is rules Capricorn and Aquarius. These are society building. The Capricorn and Aquarius energy builds the cities, builds the cultures, builds the civilizations, and you have to deal with putting limits on instinct. Aries, you have to do that in order to have any kind of social, so-called civilization. And that word I never loved. Of course, that conjures all the problems of that. But and certainly that's possible, right? It can become over controlling. But the image that I am really inspired by is the notion that there's a way to respect the instinctual energy of Aries, but also to have limits and also to have containing. And in the name of relation, of being in relationship with each other, we don't just do whatever the heck we want to do. That does not allow social coherence. So there is that piece about limit. And again, any time in one's own life, because for me, this is always more personal. I'm not really a mundane astrologer to look at, maybe people don't know that word, political astrologer. I'm not saying I'm special and not mundane, but I'm not a person who looks at the politics much. But what I do think about is individually. So then the question would be, when you feel these powerful instincts, we look at all that Aries, right? There's going to be a lot that comes up. There's going to be quick to anger, but then you're invited to take a moment, and Saturn says, what will be the consequence here? And doesn't mean shutting it down. Doesn't have to mean, right? Doesn't mean you have to swallow it, but it means slowing it down, and finding out what else is possible. Because
yeah, I'm thinking that's excellent. I'm thinking with Ceres there, the goddess Ceres.
Yeah.
She is the nurturing of ourselves and nurturing others. So that's a help, because there is also the grief side of it. But the other side of this that also is I'm remembering from the mythology is the idea that in that sextile that we're bringing up, which is going to move closer and closer as we progress between Saturn and Neptune, with the trine between Pluto and Uranus, that it's very much like when Jupiter went into, after the story of Cronus, that then Saturn actually ends up in a positive place. I want to move along a little bit here. I'm just going to say that there is a timeline, that there is a square coming up with Jupiter and Saturn that is actually the only one when Saturn is in Aries. It won't have one in it won't happen in Capricorn with Jupiter. So, and this is from the 1900s until 2050, actually. And that'll be on the 25th. So that's going to be that contraction and expansion that we're talking about. And also when just after Jupiter has gone into its sense of personal history and emotional life, then there'll be on the 1st, the retrograde. On the 14th is when it goes back into Aries until the 28th. Then here I want to end up, the point of Thales is a particular opposition with another point that is sextile. And let's stop here and we'll end here. We have a couple of minutes, but Laura and I put the three together, and we realized that there is a point of Thales with Mars talking about the ruler of Aries, stock, 100%, where there's an opposition where in February, with where we're headed in a couple of weeks on the 25th, but the retrograde is going to be that point of the Thales point that's both sextile and it's like projecting ahead and looking behind where we're going to be at with a trine and a sextile. Oh, it's a lot to take in, but it is going to be where I think
so
what
each chart is Saturn at 0 degrees Aries, and then Mars is an exact aspect to itself in each chart.
Meaning that we really have a chance to do exactly, I think, Jason, what you were suggesting with the instinctive looking ahead of bringing into form what we want. Oh, what did I do? I don't want to do all that. Well, I see. Nathan's helping me. What are we thinking about? Where are we at? Well, we're between the moments. We're still actually in before it hits on the 25th. Thank you, Jason. We have a few moments we can talk. It's a real treat and pleasure. I love your classes. I love hearing what you say. It's insightful. Little moments. So, folks, remember, we don't get swallowed in one way.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.